Welcome back to my channel, or hi, welcome back to my channel. This book review is not going to be easy. This book is for The German Wife by Kelly Rimmer, and it was an educational book for me in a lot of ways. Now, the first thing I want to say is that we all read books for different reasons. One of the reasons that I enjoy reading is to edify myself, to increase these brain cells, keep these brain cells going and learn more. Sometimes, however, learning more brings about very, very hard emotions, even to the point of tears, real tears, by reading this book. And that's what this book did. Now, I'm going to start this book review by going to the author notes at the end of the book. I don't know if it's notes. What does she call them? Let me see. Okay. A note from Kelly, a note from the author. Now, this book took place in two time periods, 1930s Berlin, Germany, and 1950s Alabama. What this note from Kelly talks about is she had accompanied a friend on a trip and she saw a display and she started reading about what was on this plaque. And there she learned about something that was called Operation Paperclip. Learning about Operation Paperclip made our author of this book, yes, I'm using my Kindle for my notes, fall into this rabbit hole. Well, what was Operation Paperclip? Operation Paperclip, which I had never heard of, so that's why I love reading. Operation Paperclip was a program that brought the most valuable German scientists across the Atlantic Ocean to work for the U.S. government in the space program. Now, that's not, I didn't read that from here. I kind of paraphrased it. Now, it says here that over 1,600 German scientists and engineers across many disciplines, whether it was chemistry, physics, architecture, medicine, and rocketry, were brought to the U.S. to work with the U.S. scientists in order to make the space program, something that is, what it is today. So, one of these German scientists, his name was Jurgen, Jurgen. Okay, he was a scientist back in 1930s Berlin, Germany. Now, the thing about Jurgen, and I don't know if it's Jurgen or Jurgen, probably Jurgen. We're going to just say Jurgen. The thing about Jurgen is in this time frame in 1930s Berlin, his expertise as a scientist was something that Hitler and his cronies wanted to take advantage of. And what they did is I have other notes. I have notes in actually 1, 2, 3 places. What they did was I don't know if I want to use the word recruited him for the program. Now, it was just prior to World War II, okay? Pearl Harbor had not yet been attacked in Hawaii, and because we're talking about 1930s Berlin. But Hitler was in power, and he wanted this expertise that Jurgen had that would be directed to what we knew would be World War II when it happened, okay? That was 1930s, okay? Now, this project was a top secret project. And when he was recruited, right around the time that he was forced into this program, there were some things happening. Sophie, his wife, had a best friend named Mayim. Mayim was Jewish. At that time, Sophie and Mayim did not see color lines, they did not see racial lines or anything. They were friends. But now her husband has been segued into this program, and it caused division between Sophie and Mayim. Now, idealism, okay? I'm going to jump ahead to their son. Oh, goodness, I can't think of his name. Okay, I can't think of their son. They had a son who was in primary school. I also learned in the author notes that these children, and I read a book a few weeks ago that I learned about this too, blonde, blue-eyed children. Their children were being indoctrinated in, actually I do have his name, George. I think his name was George. The children would be, yes, their son George was being indoctrinated in Hitler's idealism or ideology. Okay, so that's going on. Now, let's get back to Jurgen. Okay, Jurgen is faced with pretty much no choice. And I am going back to my iPad because I want to see what I wrote down. Okay, why won't we do that? I want to see how I worded it in case I want to use it in this particular review. The way I worded it in my review, these are just notes, so I may change it, is Jurgen was forced to work along with Hitler's plans in 1930s Berlin. A brilliant scientist. They wanted to use Jurgen in this rocket program, a top secret program. But in my notes, I wrote down that his choice or choices when it came to joining the SS or this program was taken away from him. So he had no choice but to power on. In fact, if he fought them on this, not only would he, well, I'm going to say this. We're segueing into World War II. And we know Jews are being exterminated by the millions. Should Jurgen decline this command to join this program, he could lose his life. His wife Sophie could lose their lives. Their children, George and Laura, could lose their lives. Later, they had another child a year or two later, but at that time, his whole family could have lost their lives had he declined joining that program. So I just wanted to mention that. Now, let's jump ahead. Well, I'll say one more thing. Remember I mentioned George being indoctrinated? There was a lot of brainwashing going on. That was what was going on at that time. So, the story jumps ahead to 1950s Alabama. Now, before we get to 1950s Alabama, Sophie and Henry were siblings that grew up right around the time of where the Dust Bowl, like I read a book called The Dust Bowl Orphans by Suzette D. Harrison a year or so ago, or maybe in January. Anyway, it was my favorite book. So anyway, the Dust Bowl was going on, so farms were failing left and right. That's where Lizzie grew up, okay? And what we see back in that Texas farm during the years of the Dust Bowl tragedy and the Depression, Lizzie and Henry went through a lot. Their family suffered greatly, okay? That was, like I said, back in the 30s. So we're segueing into 1950s Alabama. In 1950s Alabama is where Lizzie is living with now her husband Calvin and sometimes her brother Henry. Henry stays with them. But not only do we have Lizzie and Henry and Calvin living in Alabama, now we have Sophie and her two children, two of her children, travel to Alabama to join her husband Jurgen. Well, why is Jurgen in Alabama in the 1950s if he was part of the SS back in the 1930s, 1940s during World War II? Well, now there's something going on called Operation Paperclip. Okay? Now, according to our author, over 1,600 German scientists were brought in to America to work with the developing space program. And Jurgen was one of those scientists, but more than just being a scientist, he was formerly of the SS, formerly a Nazi. The thing is, you're going to learn through the pages of this book that he didn't ascribe to the idealism of the whole Nazi regime. But the fact is, he was a German man who did what he had to do in order to keep his family safe. So now they live a few blocks apart and their stories are going on. You have Americans who, in this case, were not fully aware of Jurgen's past and Sophie's past, but now they're neighbors. And they're giving a choice to a fresh start. And if you look at things from Sophie's perspective on this side and from Lizzie's perspective on this side, you see two completely different lives that these women are leading now in 1950s Alabama. Lizzie has her strong views of Germans, but Sophie, who is a German, has a lot of compassion for the Jews. Meanwhile, while this program is taking place, there starts to be some kind of whispering that some of these Germans that came over were part of the Nazi regime. And let me tell you, the drama in this book was so intense that every time Jurgen and Sophie cried, I cried. Every time Lizzie's sympathy and empathy towards her brother Henry came into play, that brought tears to my eyes. Okay? When I say Lizzie's sympathy and empathy towards Henry, well, Henry had developed something that was called combat fatigue. And due to his combat fatigue, he experienced a lot of things that really warped his thinking and his actions. So while you were feeling for Jurgen and Sophie trying to live their lives with the two children that she came to America with to join him, you're also watching Lizzie and Henry's story evolve, and how Henry, he was a war hero, yes, but what happened to Henry? Now, the book was very, very well written, phenomenal even, to the point where there's no doubt that our author Kelly Rimmer did extensive research. Yes, the idea for the book stemmed from her reading this plaque and learning about Operation Paperclip, but according to her notes, she fell down the Operation Paperclip rabbit hole, and we get the benefit of that in this book. And then the last thing I want to mention in this review is at the end, there is a reader's guide. So if this book were to be used as a discussion book for a book group, some of the questions were we aware of the Dust Bowl in America? Or were we aware of Operation Paperclip? And no, I'm not giving you any spoilers. How did Sophie and Jurgen make decisions that affected the welfare of their family? And then how did Lizzie make decisions that affected the protection of Henry? Okay, sorry about that. So then you have to wonder, who in this book were you more drawn to? I know who I was more drawn to. I'd be interested to see who you would be more drawn to. And then one of the questions is, did any lines or paragraphs from the book seem especially memorable to you? And I can definitely say yes, there were some very memorable things. The last question that I want to mention that comes in there is, what will you remember most about this book? What will I remember most about this book is going to be different than what you might remember most about this book. But what I remember most about this book is being caught up in a time when idealism, ideology, brainwashing, and life or death decisions had to be made. And I also wanted to mention that how quick people were to judgment in this book. That's something else that I think I got a lot out of this book. So there you have it, The German Wife by Kelly Rimmer. I think it's released today, the 28th, yes. So as soon as I edit this video, I will go ahead and post it. Sorry for the background noise. You know, I don't live alone, so you got sneezing and all that stuff. So anyway, thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.